So, words. Here in Unity, we teach that words have power, right? Charles Fillmore, in Dynamics for Living, said that the spoken word, in particular, carries vibrations through the universe and moves the intelligence inherent in every form, animate or inanimate. In the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 8, we hear the story about how with this centurion comes to Jesus asking him to heal his servant from afar and says to Jesus with absolute faith, "Lord, only speak the word, and my servant will be healed." Speak the word, and my servant will be healed. And so Jesus says to him, "Go, let it be done for you according to your faith." And the servant was healed in that hour. Certainly, words can have immense power. Indeed, in Unity, we believe that through the power of the spoken word, each and every one of us has the ability to activate this innate divine wisdom or intelligence within our own bodies, within our own beings, within our own lives and the world. And by doing so, we're able to birth this greater expression of God's unity and wholeness in our bodies, our minds, our hearts, in our beings, and in the world around us. So today's talk is about how we can tap into this power, the power of our words, spoken and sung, with spiritual authority, so that we can speak forth a world of love, peace, and joy. So first, we'll explore the significance and impact of words, both our own and others. Second, we'll look at how, by recognizing consciousness, actually, as the life source of words, we can first disempower the effects of words of lack and limitation over us, and we can proclaim and energize words of truth. And then finally, we'll explore how we can rely on the Word of God, which we'll find out is not a word at all, but is actually the source of all words, as the basis of all words of truth, affirmations, basically. We'll explore this as the foundation of our ability to express truth in and through every aspect of ourselves and our lives, such that, like Jesus, we can just speak the word and know that we are birthing a greater world, a world of abundance, a world of peace, a world of love and wholeness. So today we'll remember Jesus' teaching that what he did, we also can do and more. That we should carry on his ministry and make the Spirit flesh, embodied in us through the power of our word. So first, let's consider the impact of words. Words, in my view, can certainly support, transform, and heal us. As someone who felt very alone as a child, I turned to books quite a bit. I turned to poetries, and poets like Wordsworth and E.E. Cummings and Robert Frost became some of my dearest friends. And then when I started on my spiritual journey, I discovered new poets like Mary Oliver and David White and Rumi and Hafiz. And actually, I'm a staff writer for the Daily Word now today, as of December 2012. And I decided to do that in part because of how words had inspired me in my childhood. I felt like maybe by writing these pieces, I could reach people who felt as alone as I did. So the power of words is evidenced in this poem by Derek Walcott, Love After Love. I remember when I first read this poem, his words were like this pipe dream for me. And I realized as I was reviewing it with Victor last night, wow, this is my life now. Love after love. The time will come when with elation, you will greet yourself arriving at your own door, in your own mirror, and each will smile the other's welcome and say, sit here, eat. You will love again the stranger who was yourself. Give wine, give bread, give back your heart to itself, to the stranger who has loved you all your life, whom you ignored for another, who knows you by heart. Take down the love letters from the bookshelf, the photographs, the desperate notes. Peel your own image from the mirror and sit. Feast on your life. Powerful, transformative words such as those found in poetry, prayer, in songs like Victor's, in inspirational writings, in love notes we might write to one another. All of these can help us to transcend our worldly circumstances and help us enter into a deeper experience of the divine. And they can also help us to connect with one another in our shared humanity, right? In shared experiences, in a shared sense of kindred beliefs and kindred hopes. And at the same time, in my very personal experience, words can hurt us deeply. Whether they're spoken by our families, partners, teachers, the media, words can manipulate us into believing that we're not good enough or that we don't have enough. They can convince us that we want or need something we don't really need or want, right? In a little book called All I Really Need to Know, I learned in kindergarten, Robert Fulghum writes this: sticks and stones can break our bones, but words will break our hearts. And I loved when I read this because you know that childhood like truism, sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Never felt true to me. So certainly words can have tremendous power. But as co-founder of the Unity Movement, Charles Fillmore taught, nothing in this world of form has existence or power but for the Spirit that creates it, sustains it, and energizes it. So even as we stay mindful here of the impact or potential impact of words, let's consider my second point, which is this. Like everything else in the world of form, words have life solely by the consciousness that sustains it. So words are empowered first by our collective consciousness, right? By our collective understanding of the nature and the meaning of the words. Words are also empowered by the originating consciousness of the person who spoke the word. And people of great spiritual consciousness like Jesus can just speak the word and it's made manifest. But most importantly, in my view, for my personal practice, words have the power that we ourselves give to them. So apparently, when it comes to giving power to other people's words, I've been very generous throughout my life. Indeed, I've doled out power to perfect strangers, to my parents for sure, to even ignorant children on the playground. Because you see, as a young Vietnamese girl growing up in California in the 70s, right after the Vietnam War, I was certainly teased and called names like chink. I'm not even Chinese, but like chink, and even things like dog eater. And then I would go home, and even in my own family, such was my soul's journey, I was told I was weird, that I was different from the rest of them, I was too fat, my skin was too dark, and I was supposed to be a boy. So my mother told me. Words. I was affected not only by the words that were spoken to me, but by the words that have never been spoken. And to this day, I have never heard either of my parents say, I love you, or I'm proud of you. So I do what we do, right? I wove other people's words into my own life story. A story of not belonging, not to this country, not to my family, so certainly not to this life or this world. And so I thought, being a very reasonable child, that I would earn my way into existence by excelling in everything that I did. So I got straight A's and I lettered in sports to justify my worth. So we each do this, right? We take other people's words, and through those words, we tell our own life story. But too often, these stories are comprised of words that were given to us that don't belong to us in truth, right? And too often, these stories tell of our misguided efforts to hear words of love and approval from those specially designated somebodies, words such as, you're worthy, or you're lovable. And the beauty of life, the beauty of conscious spiritual life, is that we can rewrite our stories. And in fact, we actually do so every day. The question is, from where do we derive our materials, our source materials for rewriting the story? Do we simply copy and paste the past onto the future? Do we look outside to the world of appearances and go, oh, look, that's my experience, and therefore that's going to be my experience? Do we do that, right? If the source of information for our stories is the outer world, the world of appearances, then for sure, all we're doing is copying and pasting, because our outer world is actually an expression of our most recent consciousness, right? So we never move anywhere. But if the source of our story is spirit, then that's another story. Paul Hasselbeck, Dean of Spiritual Education and Enrichment at Unity Village, writes in his book, Heart-Centered Metaphysics, a great book, by the way, words are really the expressions of consciousness, and consciousness is the ruling factor. Words may be based on sense consciousness, consciousness of the outer, or on oneness, divine mind, and the inner realm. And my final point in today's talk, let's explore how we might do this, how our words and our life script might come to reflect our inner rather than the outer world. So, up until I began my spiritual journey a decade ago, I looked to the outer world of appearances almost solely to tell me about my own nature, In fact, what people told me about me was what I took as my identity. So not only that, I incorporated their words into my own self-talk, which ended up being highly berating, right? So in fact, it wasn't until I hit bottom and ended up in a 12-step program in 2004 that I realized through a friend's astute observation, oh, wow, Nhien, he says, I see why now that you could never be alone, that you have issues with being alone. Because when you're alone with yourself, you verbally abuse yourself. When I was alone with myself, I would tell myself all sorts of things, the same tapes. You're fat. Something's wrong with you. You're different. You don't belong here. So my addiction actually stemmed from a desire, a hunger to know my own worth. And yet the problem was I couldn't be alone with myself, and I couldn't be with other people, right? So there was this dilemma, and it seemed like an unsolvable issue. But somehow, probably because I was in enough pain, it's usually how it happens, that I began to question my own self-talk. The words and the names that I was given that I then started to give to myself, right? Somehow, because I was in this 12-step program of recovery and it encouraged prayer, I started praying, and somehow I started to know within myself this new identity. My identity as spirit, as whole, as even good, which is something I didn't know before. I began to know not only my wholeness, but through knowing spirit, I began to know my oneness. I could feel my connection to all things. So that story of not belonging started to get dissipated because of my inner experience. As I felt these things, then I started to proclaim them out loud. I started at home alone with myself. I would look in the mirror in the morning and say, I love you, Nhien, unconditionally. I love you, Nhien, unconditionally. I would repeat this to myself in the morning from the power of that which was within me. And then I would call myself and leave voicemails. Hi, how are you doing? I love you. You're awesome. I would actually do this to hear my own voice, that inner voice, that Christ voice. Speak to yourself. As Paul Hasselbeck also writes, realization of the power of words will not come if they're viewed only as sounds or a combination of letters on a printed page, like ambassadors who have a mandate to carry the power and authority of their governments. Words carry the power and authority of their originating consciousness. Speaking from the Christ of my being, I could own my truth, proclaim it, and make it manifest in my world. And then over time, I realized I'm not an alien in this world. And over time, some might identify with the story, over time, I realized that I'm not lonely. No matter where I go, I'm not lonely anymore. This happened over years, but it happened. The more I connected to Spirit within me, the Word of God within me, which was there in the beginning, my evidence for truth became unassailable by external words. No one else's words could take away my divine inheritance as a child of God. I felt the power and authority of my own words grow. The words that proclaimed the truth of my own wholeness and my oneness. And today, I can't say, I'm totally unaffected by other people's words. But the difference is now I've come to know my innate worth in such a way that other people's words don't define my worth. I think it's healthy to be open to other people's opinions, but not to let those opinions define my worthiness and worth as a child of God. Also, those affirming words that I so long wanted to hear, I started to proclaim on my own behalf. I testified on my own behalf to myself through the power of the Word of God in me, which is the source of my true identity. So to be clear, The Word of God in unity, also known as the Logos, is not itself a word at all. Yet it is the source of all true words, the source of all, as Victor was singing, beautiful truth. It is the source of all good that is created in this world. The Word of God is the same as the Christ that we speak of in unity, which is this divine idea that encompasses all divine ideas. So in the Word of God, all words of truth have their origin and thus their power to heal and to free us from our material consciousness. And we can help truth along a little bit and make it manifest in our lives, as Myrtle Fillmore did. If you know the story, Myrtle Fillmore, the co-founder of the Unity Movement, proclaimed, "I am a child of God, and I do not inherit sickness." And then she actually spoke words to every part of her body, words of truth, healing herself from her tuberculosis over a 2-year period. She spoke words of truth to herself. So steeped in the knowing of the Word of God within each of us, we can each claim first and then proclaim each new hour, each new minute, each new second, the truth of our wholeness, our abundance, and our well-being. So in sum, let me reiterate these 3 points. First, words have power. And I invite us all to be mindful as we go about our days and lives about the impact of our words on ourselves as well as on others. I invite us to exercise our ability to disclaim and thus free ourselves from the damning force of words that we've taken on that do not belong to us. Right? And finally, I encourage us all to deepen and continue our practice of prayer so that we can, like Jesus, know our Christ nature, the Word of God in us, and speak forth our lives with spiritual authority, birthing a world that reflects hope rather than despair, love rather than fear, abundance rather than lack, unity rather than discord. Through prayer, which I'll explain more thoroughly this afternoon at the workshop, I've certainly awakened to a greater knowing of my Christ nature. By claiming the power of the Word of God within me, I've better been able to proclaim with authority words of truth about myself, that I am whole and holy. I am one with God, and I belong to all of life. And I invite us, if you could use that clicker, to claim those words together. So together now, I am whole and holy. I am one with God, and I belong to all of life. Yeah. So, notably, while the stories that each of us scripts about our lives are very, very unique, truth is universal, right? And as I've awakened to the truth of my being, I've been better able to behold the Christ in other people, in each of you, and to really know your wholeness, your divinity, your beauty, your love, and your graciousness. But don't take my word for it. Go into prayer, be still, and know these truths for yourself. Thank you.